Good morning. A woman has been found stabbed to death on the Gold Coast. A man was also found at the home with serious injuries.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that brief item on Channel 9's morning news break in early June was one of hundreds of similar reports viewers will see this year about car accidents, fires, deaths and drownings, where no names are mentioned and few details given. So, who would have thought that a 7-second item could give rise to so much grief?
Good morning. A woman has been found stabbed to death on the Gold Coast. A man was also found at the home with serious injuries.
800 kilometres away from the Gold Coast, at his home in Sydney, Jason Stavely happened to be watching as this breaking news went to air. And he could see from the brief helicopter shot that the police cars and ambulance were outside his mother Beth's house. And yes, you guessed, she was the unnamed victim. As Jason told Media Watch,
I can't imagine a worse way to find out your mother has been murdered than on national television.
Well, there may not be many good ways. But Jason was quick to blame his added trauma on the media's growing tendency to publish first and ask questions later.
Reporting this crime, complete with helicopter footage, can only have been in the first with the news pursuit of ratings, as the circumstances have nothing to do with public interest. It was no threat to others and the crime took place in a private residence.
But Channel 9 was not the only one to risk identifying the victim. Almost an hour earlier, the Gold Coast Bulletin had run news of a stabbing and named the small street where Jason's mother lived. And shortly afterwards, it told readers that a grandmother who'd lived there for 16 years was dead. 2 hours later, Channel 7 ran a longer report with pictures from the scene, even though some of the victims' families still did not know. Says Stavely,
the impact on our family has been devastating, especially given there are young grandchildren to protect. Personally, I'm now on medication to sleep, antidepressants and seeing a psychotherapist.
So, could some of the shock have been avoided? Well, it seems the media had arrived at the murder house almost immediately and may have listened in to the police scanner. But police say reporters were warned that relatives were not aware of the tragedy.
Police media made it known that next of kin had not been advised of this incident.
So, should the media have done more to hide the identity of the victim? Well, the Commercial TV Code has rules about this, which say news and current affairs programmes
must take all reasonable steps to ensure that murder or accident victims are not identified directly or, where practicable, indirectly before their immediate families are notified by the authorities.
9 did not do that, and it has not apologised. But on this occasion, the media's task was harder because the family knew something was amiss, having called the police themselves after receiving an alarming text message. But even if this was a special case, editors should remember, in their rush to break news, that some of their viewers may be relatives of the victims. And now to something closer to home, to our ABC, and a new outbreak of fighting in Australia's culture wars.
Brown, I'd scrap ABC and start over.
I think it should be sold,
Mr. Brown said.
The best thing to do might be to start again.
We've heard such sentiments many times before, but what makes these different is that Neil Brown is one of 2 new recruits to the 4-person panel that chooses ABC and SBS directors, or that draws up a shortlist for Malcolm Turnbull to pick from. Mr. Brown, who was deputy leader of the Liberal Party almost 30 years ago, is convinced that the ABC is big, bad and biased. Or, as he wrote recently in his Spectator column,
a sort of private club promoting its own ideology at the taxpayer's expense. Most of its news is opinion. Its fact-checking is the new way of declaring its own approved version of the facts, and the role of Media Watch is apparently to intimidate the commercial media.
Clearly not a Media Watch fan. The second star recruit to the 4-person nomination panel is another fierce critic of the public broadcaster, who has served on its board. Janet Albrechtsen, who writes a regular column for The Australian, recently told her readers,
Mark Scott should resign.
In a campaign against ABC bias that began at least a dozen years ago, Ms Albrechtsen described the public broadcaster in one memorable critique as
staff captured, their ABC, Soviet-style workers' collective.
In that same spray, she too took aim at this programme, then under different management, claiming that
you only have to scroll through Media Watch's archives to see blatant bias at work.
Now, what makes these 2 appointments a little remarkable is that the process of appointing ABC directors is meant to be non-political. Back in 2009, Labor introduced a bill to prevent governments stacking the ABC board with their own supporters, as the Howard government famously did between 1996 and 2007. This new law established a panel, which Albrechtsen and Brown have now joined, that was supposed to be independent and at arm's length from government. So who decided it was a good idea to appoint these two culture warriors? Not me, says the Minister for Communications.
The legislation says that the decision is taken by the Secretary of Prime Minister and Cabinet, that is currently Dr. Ian Watt, and I have no doubt that decision was taken by him in his own discretion. Who he spoke to, I don't know. He didn't speak to me.
But you would assume the Prime Minister was consulted?
I don't assume anything. I assume these appointments were chosen by Dr. Watt.
And do you think that
you can always speak to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to take your call.
So, taking Mr Turnbull's advice, we did call Dr Watt, who, in case you missed it, is a senior public servant. But he wasn't happy to take our call, and he wouldn't answer our questions, one of which was...
Did Dr Ian Watt discuss the appointment of Janet Albrechtsen and Neil Brown with the Prime Minister, any of his political advisers, or any member of the Cabinet?
Nor did Dr Watt answer 4 other questions we sent him, which included this one.
Does Dr Watt consider these appointments to be non-political?
So perhaps Malcolm Turnbull, who is the minister responsible for the ABC, can shed some light on it. On Friday, he was asked the political question a bit more bluntly by the ABC's Chris Uhlmann.
Couldn't a reasonable person come to the conclusion that the government once again is trying to influence the makeup of the board of the ABC because the government believes that the ABC is biased?
Well, again, that's not for me. I don't think that's correct.
Could a reasonable person think that?
Well, you can ask. You can form that view.
And some people already have. Shadow Communications Minister Jason Clare, for one. He told Media Watch...
This is all about stacking the ABC board to try and kill it because they think the ABC is the enemy. It's as simple as that.
And it's not just the ALP who read it that way. The editorial writers at The Australian seem to agree that it's about setting the ABC straight, and it's perfectly reasonable for the government to be doing so.
It is no surprise that Tony Abbott might want to begin the task of correcting the Green left political bias at the public broadcasters by at least ensuring there is some plurality of views at the board level, the only level he can directly shape.
Not too much talk of independent appointments there. Or indeed from Neil Brown, who told The Australian on Friday that he wants to correct the ABC's lean to the left.
I certainly think there should be more balance,
he said.
I would be looking for directors who could contribute towards that balance being maintained.
But Malcolm Turnbull has a duty under the Broadcasting Act, above all, to find directors who are competent. And as he told Chris Uhlmann on Friday...
The critical thing is that the people that go on these boards have corporate and business and management experience. If you want the board to be effective, then you have to have people that are capable of performing the role of a director, and simply appointing people who have one political view or another, one social attitude or another, is not enough.
We'll see where it goes. There are currently 2 SBS and 1 ABC board seats to be filled, so watch this space. And finally tonight, to an old favourite. Several viewers have complained that journalism in Australia's weekly women's magazines is getting worse, and it seems to be true, which is more than one can say for their headlines.
Official royal news, Kate's shock, royal twins, all the exciting details.
Yes, the Duchess of Cambridge is expecting again, and it's going to be twins. Or that's what pensioner Adrian Langman thought when she forked out $4.20 for a copy of New Idea and rushed to read the story, which went like this.
Friends say the Duchess of Cambridge is overjoyed but shocked at the news Princess Charlene of Monaco is expecting twins.
Hold on. Princess Charlene of Monaco? Who on earth is she? And no babies for Kate? Not surprisingly, poor Ms Langman, who'd bought the magazine for this story, was pretty upset.
How stupid am I? I called New Idea and spoke to the office manager who said, and I quote verbatim,
I understand how you feel. I cannot refund your money, as you requested, but we'll send you a free magazine next week.
But what good is that, when the chances are it'll just be more nonsense, like this story in Rival Mag Woman's Day that another viewer complained about.
Lara Bingle.
Yes, I'm having a baby.
Those babies are everywhere, aren't they? And it's certainly wonderful news. But how come Bingle and her beau Sam Worthington had made no announcement? They must have wanted to keep it a secret. So let's find out what it's all about.
Bikini babe Lara Bingle's recent decision to cover up those famous curves with a series of loose-fitting frocks and comfortable ensembles has prompted renewed speculation she may be pregnant.
What? Speculation? Because she's wearing a baggy dress? Well, we'd have to agree with the ABC's Ian Mannix, who emailed us from a laundromat where he'd picked up the mag to say,
This is garbage journalism.
The same issue of Women's Day had another piece of celebrity news which also got Mannix in a lather.
Nicole and Keith, it's over.
Why I had to end it.
Can you believe that? They got Keith, or is it Nicole, to talk about why their marriage is over. Interesting. So what do they say?
Observers of the pair note they haven't been photographed together for about 4 weeks, breaking their firm rule of never spending more than 2 weeks apart.
Observers of the pair? Is that it? I'm afraid it is. And according to Fusion Strategies' Steve Allen, this is the way the weeklies are going.
They're getting more sensational. Frankly, half the covers, if you actually fact-checked 4 weeks later, you'd realise they're a pack of lies.
And what is driving this? Well, sales are down. In the last year, these weekly titles have lost between 4 and 20% of their paying customers. And looking further back, it's even worse. In 2010, Women's Day was selling 400,000 copies a week. It's now down to 330,000. In the same period, New Ideas sales have fallen from 330,000 to 280,000 copies. And according to academic and former magazine editor Megan Le Mesurier, the future is bleak.
The celebrity gossip magazine market in print is saturated. There are too many titles, and I imagine in the near future we will see some disappear.
As usual, it's the internet that's to blame.
People are getting much of their celebrity news fixes for free online.
But advertisers are also migrating from print to online, so revenue has taken a double hit. Hence the increasingly desperate attempts to rope in the punters.
The publishers say to me the minute they stop printing the gossip, circulation goes down.
Hence also the constant recycling of celebrity fairy tales, like the Kate is pregnant story, which was also on the cover of New Idea in March.
Kate's happy news.
I'm having a girl.
And indeed on the cover of America's Star that same week.
Pregnant Kate, it's a girl.
Meanwhile, OK Magazine was promising 2 for the price of 1.
Pregnant Kate, twins.
This is not the only time OK has run the twins story. Another favourite is Nicole Kidman. Last month, Women's Day and New Idea had her and her husband Keith Urban splitting, reuniting, planning a baby, and renewing their vows. And neither of these mags had an interview with the couple, or a named source, or a skerrick of credible evidence. And are we surprised? Sadly not. And you can read more about these stories on our website, where you can also get a transcript and download the programme. And you can catch up with us on iView and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. But until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.